incorporate current best practices in accessibility and for ways to share this information. So we just really appreciate the opportunity to be invited and to share these slides with you. So we do have notes for you as well that we will send out after this presentation. And of course, we are here for any questions that you have. But with that said, we are here today to share information about digital accessibility best practices. So our learning objectives for today are really to break down what digital accessibility is and why it's important. We're going to focus a lot on marketing and different types of ways to communicate information like flyers, emails, social media, etc. As you know, just because today's world, it has a lot of technology now. That's the primary means why or how people communicate. And so we want to share ways to share information that can reach the widest audience. And we do have a Google folder available. If you hover your phone over this QR code, it will give you access to all of our resources we have. And like I said, Shelby and I are more than happy to also share these sources with you. We can do it through email or however you prefer as well. But just wanted to give you this option here on this slide if you would like. So starting with our first question, why digital accessibility? There's a famous quote that really guides a lot of the work we do, which is, who are you choosing to exclude from accessing your content? I will say I joined the Wyoming Institute for Disabilities a little over 2 years ago, and it has been a very big learning curve in the best way. There's a lot of information where it's a matter of you don't know what you don't know. And so we hope that after sharing some of this information with you today, you can take it and continue to share it and incorporate it into the ways that you communicate. And so again, just trying to make it accessible for the widest audience possible. So we're going to start with talking about neurodiversity and hidden or invisible disabilities. So when you hear the term neurodivergence, it's actually a non-medical term, and it's associated with differences in social, cognitive, and emotional functioning. So some examples of this include OCD, ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. We have a little image here showing the different types of neurodiversity, and there's many different types, but some of these types of disabilities, as our title implies, aren't always visible. You might not know that someone has a disability, and these can impact how people process information. And so we've included a lot of best practices, again, just to help reach those wide audiences for your learners, because you may not know what type of disability that they have. And so we'll start with screen readers. So typically screen readers are used by people who are blind or low vision, and these devices speak all content on the screen for non-visual access. So they will use keyboard commands and gestures to move around and interact with the screen. And screen readers will jump around to headings, images, lists, etc. on a document or web page. And ironically, so I didn't know this, but most devices have built-in screen readers. And before we continue, Shelby, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk more about this and the different ways that they're used.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Again, thanks for joining us today. Really glad to have you all here and learning about digital accessibility. So screen readers, as Brittany said, are often used by people who are blind or have low vision or have difficulty reading for one reason or another. That's why we bring up the neurodivergence and how people process information differently. So again, as Brittany said, the screen reader will read everything on the screen, but the reason that we need to make sure it's accessible is basically so that the computer can talk to the screen reader and tell it how to interpret our documents, so that someone who is trying to read through these documents without being able to see them are still able to access the same information and understand what it is that they're trying to say. So we do have a video here, it's a short video that we can share, hopefully, that shows how screen readers sound. So it does start out with a not very well constructed document. And so it will you'll hear how the screen reader reads it when a document is just thrown together. And then we can share how it sounds when it's properly constructed.
People often ask what difference it makes if a document is accessible, or they say they know that there is no one with a disability that will be receiving their content. There are no guarantees. Documents are often shared among others. You don't want an inaccessible document attributed to your name or your company. Additionally, many accessibility features actually benefit and improve the reading experience for everyone. Today, we want to simulate what someone who uses a specific type of assistive technology, a screen reader, encounters when they access a poorly structured document. Then we'll show you what their experience is like once the document has been made accessible. Keep in mind that screen readers are just one type of assistive technology. There are many different types of disabilities and subsequently many varying technologies for people to use and experience content. In this video, Cami, one of our Section 508 specialists, is going to walk you through two scenarios to demonstrate the impact of creating accessible materials.
First, take a look at this PDF. We have colored large text, graphics, a process flow, lists, and link text. What else do you see? Now we're going to simulate using a screen reader by covering up the document. This is how someone using a screen reader would experience it.
Interacting with kids. Kids could be of any age. Sing a song. All the king's horses and all the king's men could put Humpty together again. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great ball, semicolon. Have a treat. Select the graphic item. Full and French graphic fry. Full and ice graphic cream. And
Okay, so as you can see, it's very important that the structure of a Word document is accessible because the screen reader will either jump all over the place, it will announce links out loud, and if an image isn't described, it will say graphic. And we're going to go into more depth, but we just wanted to start off by showing you why it's important right off the bat using a demonstration. And Shelby, did you have anything to add to that before we move forward?
No, I think that sounded good. I think you about covered it.
Perfect. Okay, so next we're going to talk about text and formatting. So this is again where we're getting more into the heart of the subject. And so Shelby, I'll turn it over to you to talk more about this.
Great. So text and formatting is important both for those using screen readers and accessing content digitally, but also for those who are accessing printed materials like flyers or handouts. So we want to talk a little bit about live text and optical character recognition. So optical character recognition, or OCR, is what will turn a scanned image into readable text, which we call live text. So most of the time, images such as PDFs and JPEGs or scanned text that turns into a JPEG or sometimes a PDF are not accessible by screen readers. The screen reader will not recognize that there is any text to read in there, and therefore the user of the screen reader isn't going to get any of that information. So for that reason, we need to use OCR to convert that dead text, that inaccessible text, into a live and readable version. So there are many computer programs that will do this, that can scan and convert text. There's a lot of software programs, there's apps, and a lot of times printers in your office or sometimes even home printers and scanners can perform OCR. So that's really important. So one way to detect whether or not your digital document has readable text, this is not a foolproof way, but it's pretty accurate most of the time. If you are able to highlight so that you're able to maybe copy the text in a document, usually it will be readable and accessible. So if you're able to select that text in a Word document, if you can edit it, it's probably going to be accessible. If you get crosshairs and you can just draw a box around your document or over a particular section, that's probably not going to be accessible. So we can go to the next slide. Great. So some different color and font considerations that you want to have when you're putting together a document. Especially in consideration of a flyer or something that's going to go out to a lot of people. You want to ensure that you've got high contrast between your text and your background. So whether that's lighter text on a darker background or dark text on a light background, you just want to ensure that that text is very visible against the background. Try to be conscious of color blindness. So red and green color blindness is the most common, which means that a person has difficulty perceiving reds and greens. So any colors along that spectrum might get kind of muddy, and they may turn sort of brown or gray, and an individual may have a difficult time distinguishing between those colors. So if you were to put, red font on a green background, just know that you may have some individuals who are not able to read that. Try not to put text on an image or on a busy background. Again, this just makes it more difficult for everyone to read. And we also recommend using a sans serif font. So for those who may not be familiar, serifs are the little tails and fancy things on certain fonts, such as Times New Roman. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, we have a couple of examples. The word text on the top has these little fancy serifs on the T and on the X. But a sans serif, meaning without serif, we have an example of that on the bottom. It does not have those fancy tails, and it's just a little bit easier to read. So some of these fonts include Arial, Helvetica, Calibri. Yeah, those are just easier to read. We like to encourage people putting together posters to use a minimum font size of 18-point font. This would be considered large print. You can definitely go larger than that where possible. And try to avoid large chunks of text that are italic, bold, in all caps lock, or underlined. Too much of that type of text can get to be a little bit overwhelming and difficult to read. So we have an example here. This is unfortunately a recent example put out by a department at the university. So I just want anybody who wants to chime in, feel free to throw in the chat or unmute. What do you see that's really good about this poster, and what do you see that could use improvement?
And Mariah and Shelby, I can't see the chat on my end, so if messages are coming through, just let me know, please. Thank you.
I see one that says busy font on a busy background.
Perfect, yep. What else?
Sorry, I'm trying to read the chat here too.
There's one that says there's white font on the white background and then fancy yellow writing, and it's hard to read.
Very good. Yeah, the color ratio isn't very good on this one. Yep, makes it difficult.
And then one person said the use of italics is excessive, not enough contrast.
Perfect. You guys you're catching all of them. How about the font size at the very bottom as well? Can anyone see that or read that?
Someone said the text is too small on most of the flyer. And someone also said the paragraph at the bottom is bad color and too small.
Excellent. I think you guys caught everything. Shelby, was there anything else you wanted to point out with this poster?
No, I think you got it all. The yellow font and white font on blue busy backgrounds is really difficult to read. Lots of italics. This yellow font is difficult. Yeah, definitely very small font on the bottom. So great job, guys.
All right, so in a similar vein, we're going to talk about images and how to add alternative text to images. So when you hear the term alternative text, sometimes it's referred to as alt text. And alt text just provides descriptions of visuals when the mouse hovers over an image. So usually you will just have the option, like if you're working on a Word document and you add an image, you can right click and there will be an option to add alt text, and then you can add a brief description of the image. So that said, it's really important to decide if a visual is decorative or informative. So if an image is just there to add to the prettiness of a document or just there to help make it look good, you don't need to add any alt text. It's only if it's conveying part of a message. So we added this random picture of a goldfish on our slide because it really doesn't add much to the slide in terms of important information. It's just there as decoration. And so this is just we're not even going to add a description as a goldfish. It's just there. We can mark it as decorative. So again, if you right click on that image in a Word doc, you will see the option to add as decorative as well. And when you are adding alt text, it's important to describe the most important information, and this will change by context. So we're going to get into that in a little bit too. And also not saying image of or graphic of in your description, just because screen readers will already identify that as an image or graphic, and it just becomes redundant. So that part is not necessary. So try to interpret the image, just state what you see. Or excuse me, try not to interpret the image, just state what you see. So we're going to have some examples and let you guys have some experience practicing with this. So one of our first examples, this image is a map of Wyoming, and its description, there can be several descriptions, quite honestly. So one perfectly reasonable description is a Wyoming state map labeled with major cities. That is very clear, it's concise, it really gets at the heart of what the image is. Now, this can change by context. So if we wanted to highlight Cheyenne, the capital, there's a little red dot in the bottom corner of that image. So we could also say Wyoming's capital city, Cheyenne, is located in the southeast corner of the state. It's still clear, pretty concise. It takes on a slightly different meaning, again, because we're highlighting the capital here, not necessarily the whole state of Wyoming. But we can use the same image to do that. And so just be aware that context can slightly change your description of an image. And so we're going to go ahead and give you guys a shot at this. So this is a picture. There's a lot of different types of vehicles in the picture. And I'm not going to get too in the weeds just because I want to give you an opportunity to describe it as well. But would anyone like to take a stab at how you would describe this image if you were adding alternative text? I have yet to see where someone is just completely off the mark here. Usually there's a few different descriptions, but they usually work. Just remember to be as clear and concise as you can. Shelby and Mariah, are anything coming through in the chat?
We just had one that came in. It said a variety of vehicles on a beach.
Perfect. Yeah, it has the subject of the image. It gives a brief description of what they're doing. That's perfect. Anyone else want to take a stab?
We have another one that says vehicles moving left to right across sand.
Okay, great. Now, I do want to point out too, I think those two descriptions are perfect. And notice they're not overly wordy either. We have seen some examples in the past where people, they like to add as much detail as possible, like several cars driving across the white sand against a cloudy blue sky, probably on the salt flats of Salt Lake City. That's the part where you really just don't need to get into the weeds that far, as long as you're conveying the gist of what that image is. So I think those two were great examples. Thank you for those, to everyone who typed those in the chat. And Shelby, you have, oh, go ahead.
I'll just say we did get a couple more here. Recreational cruising in multiple vehicles against a blue cloudy sky.
Okay.
An assortment of vehicles driving on the beach, on the beach sand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
you guys got it.
Really good.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you again for everyone's participation. We're going to put you on the spot a few more times, but you guys are already nailing it. So nice job. And Shelby, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. So again, we talked about neurodivergence and how different people understand and perceive things differently. And one way that we can help mitigate that is using plain language. So plain language is not an exact science. It's a way to reduce the complexity of text in order to make it a little bit more understandable for anyone. So we want to try and aim for a major improvement, not for total and complete access and perfection. Plain language is generally considered about a 4th or 5th grade reading level. But then you can also have an easy read, which is around 2nd or 3rd grade reading level. Basically, you just want to write in shorter sentences. Try to convey just one idea per sentence instead of using a lot of run-on sentences, multiple compound sentences, commas, things like that. And then use active voice and verbs. So active voice would be like the chef cooked the meal, whereas a passive voice is the meal was cooked by the chef. When I say the chef cooked the meal, it's just a little bit more direct and therefore a little bit more accessible to all readers.
And I do want to note too, there are tools available that will tell you the readability of any words or paragraphs that you write, and we will provide links to those as well following this presentation.
Absolutely. And ChatGPT is a great way to do that as well. You can plug in a passage and ask it to revise it at, a 5th grade reading level, and it will help you do that. So I'm going to keep on here. We'll talk a little bit about emails and social media posts. I imagine you guys probably try and promote many of your services. So we'll talk a little bit about accessibility across these platforms. So this should be pretty straightforward for most of us who are sending emails on a regular basis. Be sure to include all the important information in your emails: who, what, where, when, and why. If there's a request in that email, what is being asked, and then is there a deadline? I know that, especially with me, a lot of times, we're sending so many emails, it's easy to get caught up in just sending something real quick, and you forget some of the most important things. How many of you have forgotten to include an attachment when you send out something? I know I definitely have. So in the body of your message, include all of that key information. Include the key information from your attachments and your images, and also make a note that you are including those attachments or images in the body of the paragraph, of the email. So continuing on with some accessible email best practices with our attachments and images. So again, photos and screenshots or scans of flyers will turn that text into an image and make it not readable or accessible. So we want to ensure that when we are including flyer attachments, that we have performed OCR or ensured that it is an accessible document when we go to attach it. Because when we embed an image in an email, yeah, it may not be accessible. So therefore you want to include alt text on the images within the emails and limit those words like we just talked about. It doesn't need to be overly wordy. Ensure that you're using live text to convey the information from your photos and flyers in the body of the message. Again, indicate that there is an attachment that you've included so that people know to look for that. But then you also want to include the pertinent information from the flyer in the email. So if your flyer is showing or talking about a particular event, don't just say, see the flyer below for details. Try and include the important information in the body of the email because the text in the body of an email is accessible.
And I do want to add too is sometimes there has been pushback in the sense of, well, this is just adding extra work. That has been a complaint that people have had, and the reality is we simply need to reframe it. It's not extra work, but in reality, if you're sending it without making it accessible, it's incomplete. And truly, our goal from this presentation is to show you that a lot of these steps don't require a lot of extra time. They're just little checks that you can do to make sure that you are making sure it's complete before you send it out.
Yeah, so talking about hyperlinks within emails, or really within any document that you're sending out. So remember that Brittany mentioned that screen readers have the ability to jump from heading to heading, list to list, or through hyperlinks. And so screen readers can detect those links, and they can navigate through if there was a particular link that they wanted to go back and check out after maybe they've read the full article. However, the most common way to include these links is to say, click here or learn more. And when you're scrolling through an entire article of click here, more, learn more, it can be really difficult to understand what exactly those links go to or to find the one that they were interested in checking out. So we want to try and avoid this vague, uninformative link phrases and instead try to use something that's a lot more helpful and descriptive. So we want to include link phrases that actually match where the link is going. So if we're talking about an assistive technology program, you might say, check out our device database. And you might hyperlink the device database instead of saying something like, to see more about our devices, click here. So it makes it a little bit easier and more understandable to get where you're going. With that link, then including that linked text, you want to convey the purpose of the link, but you don't need to do it any longer than that. Links should be words or phrases. They don't need to be entire sentences or paragraphs. Be sure to underline those links, although I think that does happen automatically in most cases. Oftentimes we do want to try to avoid using the entire link or hyperlink because screen readers will read out the entire URL. So they'll say link https://www. So it gets really tedious to listen through. Not to mention that a lot of those URLs aren't super descriptive by themselves either. The exception for posting the entire URL would be if you are printing materials or using branded URLs. So something like wyomingtelehealth.org is pretty short and easy to get to, understandable. And then if you're printing out those materials, you want to have that full URL so that someone could type it in and access that. All right. So we can move on to accessible social media. And a lot of this is going to kind of reflect what we've talked about already today. Just apply those principles really anywhere that you're putting information out there. So use your color and font considerations that we talked about earlier. Add alternative text to images. Upload image descriptions if needed, or include them. You can include an image description directly in the body of your social media post. Include captions on videos wherever possible. This helps both the deaf and hard of hearing community, as well as those who may not be in a position to turn on the volume on their videos at the time. Avoid strobing or flashing videos or video clips. Again, with some of those neurodivergent disabilities, it can be really distracting to some people. If you're using hashtags, think about using camel case, which is capitalizing the first letter of each word within that hashtag. For example, disability inclusion capitalizes both the D in disability and the I in inclusion. It makes it just a little bit more readable. Lastly, limit the use of emojis. I know that they can be fun, but they can also be a little bit confusing to certain individuals. Some screen readers can read the emojis, and with AI, it's getting a lot better. But there are individuals not using screen readers who may not understand what an emoji is or is trying to say, and others may not be able to interpret the meaning of the emoji or the facial expression. So we've got an example here again of an accessible social media post. Does anybody want to, I know the text is a little small on this one, but if anybody is able to pick out, again, goods and bads of this post? Brittany, while everybody's thinking, did you have anything else to add to emails or social media?
Nope, I think you covered everything, Shelby. That was perfect.
All right. Let's see. One person says shorten the URL link if possible, possibly add a QR code. Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Yeah, so overall, this is a pretty good example of a social media post that's pretty accessible. It does include a description of the image below, but yeah, it does include that full URL. So that's definitely an area we could improve on, is shortening up that URL link. Yeah, maybe including a URL, or excuse me, a QR code. Yeah.
And I like that idea too. I remember I took a training a few months ago, and the presenter talked about not necessarily that you had to be perfect with your best practices, but trying to find one way as an alternative. So if you let people click on a link, also, you know, the alternative would be also giving them a QR code. So always give them the information and then one other way to give them the same information if possible. I know Shelby said earlier that, you know, it's not an exact science when it comes to plain language. And we would say it's not always an exact science when it comes to accessibility. I think this is a pretty extensive field and we're continuing to learn. But as long as you're doing your best and trying to be cognizant of the different people in your audience and different ways that you can provide more options, I think that's really the key here. And so we just have a final couple sections for you before we end today, but we're going to shift gears really quickly to videos and captioning. And so, as Shelby did mention earlier as well, it's really important to include captions on your videos when possible. And so there are a lot of tools now that will include automatic captions. YouTube is a great example of that. However, it is still best practice when possible to upload your own captions when you can, just to make sure that it is as accurate as it can be. And when it comes to captions, it's really important that the words are synchronized and they're matching what the speaker is saying, so that the words basically appear the same time the speaker is speaking. And then if you want to enable the closed captions on YouTube, on the very bottom right of the YouTube screen, there will be that little CC button that stands for closed captions. You can click on that and then captions will come up for you. And again, it's really important to review them for accuracy when possible. And we also have audio descriptions. So these are similar to captions, but kind of the reverse. So audio descriptions provide access for a lot of people, and they may not be readily available in all video formats. And so basically, if visual information is not described in the video, it's helpful to provide a narrative description of the important information. So some ways you can do this is to pause the video and describe what is going on, and just to give visual descriptions as you're giving a presentation. And so one example that we really like to use is from Star Wars. So I don't know how many Star Wars fans we have in the audience, but most the movies start with a narration of what's going on. Or excuse me, a word summary of what's going on. So they'll provide the background, but the problem is these words, if people are blind or low vision, they may not be able to read what is happening for this important background information of the movie. And so something you could do is, again, pause the movie and read what is going on, or give a description of what is going on for viewers. And then when it comes to presentations, there is free captioning available in Zoom and PowerPoint. And I have to say, I'm really excited to see where technology continues to grow, just because a lot of these tools are incorporating more and more features. But we just thought it was important to highlight that this is available on these tools, and we can certainly get into the details on how to do that if you are interested, but just know that that functionality exists is our key point here. And with that said, we do have a short survey that we would love to hear your feedback. This helps us improve our presentations and helps us to see, are there any gaps or anything that you wanted to learn more about? We would love to hear from you just to make our presentations better and help more people. So, and we will be sending out a link to the survey as well. So you can either hover over this QR code or wait until a follow-up email, and we'll send a link to the survey there as well.
And I'm just going to jump in real quick there. That QR code is an older one. I didn't get a chance to update it, but I did put a link in the chat. So if you could please use that, that would be awesome.
Oh, thanks, Shelby. Sorry about that.
No, that's my fault.
Are there any questions for Shelby and I? We'd be happy to help answer what we can and direct you to other resources if we can't.
I know we went through this really quick. It's a lot of information in a short amount of time. But again, we really appreciate you all taking the time to come out and learn about how to increase accessibility. Because there is so much information, we certainly don't expect you all to take it all and implement everything that we've talked about all at once. If you take away even just one or two things from today, and you can start thinking about your color contrast or what font you're using, including captions on your PowerPoints, things like that, start small and kind of work up. There's a comment that says, "Thank you. I look forward to sharing this with the staff who need it." Great. Awesome. Thanks, Rachel.
And I will share our contact information as well. You are more than welcome to email us or call us here at the Wyoming Institute for Disabilities. If you would like us to do additional trainings or if you'd like more information on a certain topic, we'd be happy to help where we can. Like I said, we have an accessibility committee, and so we're always looking for opportunities to help meet people where they're at and help get the information out.
Thank you guys so much for coming and presenting to our network. Yeah, I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for everyone who joined us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Mariah.